My name is Nathan Clark. I run a small two-man shop here in town. I have the pleasure of working with a good friend from college. He does graphic design. I do web development. So ironically, as a little backstory, I'm a fine arts student. You computer scientists and your nice buildings, I'm not used to this kind of stuff. So I grew up kind of doing design. Web design is what got me started in this. After a while, I started doing web standards. That led to an unfortunate foray in JavaScript. And then I quickly found Ruby and just found it the easiest language to program in. And now for the last 6 years, I've been writing Ruby with no formal training. So I'm probably going to make a fool of myself up here in front of this audience. So just kind of be patient and roll with me. What we're going to be talking about is going to be maybe a little more not so Ruby-centric, but we do deal with Rails and kind of the stuff that we run into in Rails a lot. So that's what I want to talk about. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about a plugin that I kind of re-authored. It's on GitHub, and I think I'm the 4th or 5th generation of it. But it's one that has taken off, relatively speaking, on GitHub. And so I'm just going to share how we got to where it is and where it's going to go next, and then also just what my experience has been on GitHub, working in that open source community and having people share and share alike, and what kind of fun things have happened there. A lot of our clients that we get as they're trying to build the next Facebook or the next Twitter or the next fill in the blank, they all have these kind of fun design or application needs that are kind of file intensive. And so I can remember 4 years ago was when we first heard about Amazon S3, and we started using it pretty on a regular basis. And I did some back of the napkin math. Our S3 bill for one of our projects is like $55 a month, which probably isn't that much for some people. But like for us, when you think about what we would have been paying on some other service 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that's a fantastic savings. So we now use it pretty exclusively. And this SWF plugin allows us to push files directly to S3. The goal is we want to be able to upload lots and lots of files, have good user feedback. Matt, my partner, he handles all the design and the usability and the interface stuff, and he actually cares about what the user sees on that side. So he's always pushing for that kind of stuff. And so pushing lots of files to S3 and handling them through a Rails application as best as possible is what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And we're going to do it through this plugin. So let's see how this works. Basics about Amazon S3. When we're pushing a file over HTTP, it just asks for a handful of things. It wants to know who you are, what the file is you're pushing, what kind of file it is, where you want to store it on S3, and like permissions and stuff like that. And then to make sure you're you, you generate a policy and a signature that has some hash encoding, and you get your secret Amazon SW3 key and stuff like that. So that's how it works. And at a very low level, you can actually do this via an HTML form and do a direct post straight to S3. This is really cool. It's a very basic API almost of pushing stuff to S3. The only problem with this is that you're doing one file at a time. You're having to pre-generate all of your signatures and policies on the server side. And the hardest part is that your application has no idea what's going on S3. The file goes up, done deal, like end of story. There's no feedback to the application. You don't know what's going on and stuff like that. So some people were feeling this pain point, and they said, wouldn't it be great if we could send multiple files, be able to kind of interact more with our application? And then also the other thing that was really cool was we'd like to be able to track file upload progress. So enter the Flex, early versions of the Flex SWF uploader. And this is it's a Flex or Flash object that's embedded on the page. Allows you to pick a file, and then Flex contacts your server and says, hey, I've got this key and this content type. Can you send me back a policy and a signature? So your application securely generates your policy and your signature, sends that back to Flex, and then Flex does all the heavy lifting directly to S3. So you don't have to worry about long wait times. If you have a client that's uploading, if they're generating the next Flickr and they're trying to upload 100 photos that are 15 megs each, that's just going to bring down your server. You just, that long polling between each file and stuff like that, nobody else will be able to access it. So the benefit here is that Flex only touches your application to get your signature and your policy. And as soon as it has that information, it does as much heavy lifting as you need directly onto S3. And so now we have cool things like we can upload and select multiple files at once. We can track the progress of that, I can't think of 500 meg file that someone's trying to push. Flash can track that information as it leaves the Flash object and kind of give you a progress bar. And later versions of this allowed you to set some parameters that kind of had callbacks about what's happening in the Flash object, how it's interacting with the server, and stuff like that. But the big problem with Flex is Flex is Flex. It looks like Flex. It is written in kind of an XML code and stuff like that. And the problem then is if Flex isn't doing exactly what you want it to, you have to branch it and figure out how to make it do your own thing. So this is a screenshot of one of the branches of an earlier version. And you can see these guys this guy needed one that had a certain callback. This guy needed one that was blue to match the design. This guy needed one that was green to match his design. This guy wanted a button that was round. This guy wanted a button that was square. Everybody had to come up with their own look and feel for it. And so that's kind of where we came in. And our client and Matt, my designer, said, we don't want this. We want what Flickr has. And I don't have it in front of me here, but I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Flickr uploader, the web-based Flickr uploader. Just this gorgeous, click the browse button, hit select, populates a list. You track the files going up, that tracks it resizing, and when it's done, it gives you a giant check mark and says, hey, great, why don't you go check them out? They wanted that. And so that's what we set out to solve. And kind of the goals that we came up with was, this is a web-based system. We're a web shop. We make web-based products. And so we should just adhere to the web standards. We want presentation controlled by CSS. We want behavior controlled by JavaScript. And the only thing that Flash is doing for us is allowing us to do multiple files at once. And we want that progress tracker in there. Those were the two kind of cool UI elements that we could do. Everything else, let the JavaScript guy write it. Everything else, let the designer write the CSS. And we'll go from there. The only problem that we ran into is in Adobe Flash Player for security reasons, for very valid security reasons. They said if you're going to have somebody pull up a file dialog box, you actually have to physically click on the Flash object. And so that means that we couldn't just hide this in the background. I know that the new there's a WebSockets that are rolling out, and they have a fallback to where if you don't have WebSockets supported in your browser natively, in the background where you can't see it, a little Flash object gets built and it runs it for you. But with this, the user actually has to click on the Flash object to get the file dialog box to open up. So that was the only problem we ran into. Everything else we could do. So we rewrote, first time I ever branched somebody's thing on GitHub, took it, got a Flash book, got a Flex book, and just started going through, and everywhere a previous developer had said, oh, I'm going to come up with this very clever solution, we stripped it out and said, we're just going to make this a JavaScript callback, or we're going to make this a JavaScript call. And we're not going to give it any sort of language parameters. We're not going to do anything like that, so that if somebody wants to write this in Spanish, in German, any sort of internationalization stuff, they can do that. If someone wants to customize how it handles some sort of signature input-output error, they can do that. Anything that could happen inside the Flash object is now controlled through JavaScript. So the result is that we can call 4 Flex functions from JavaScript in the web page. And so there's a start uploading, stop uploading, clear the queue, and remove a specific file from the queue of files. And these are calls that the JavaScript, or the Flash object will respond to. And that's all that you really need to control the Flex object. But what's really incredible is that we came up with 25 different things that the Flex object could tell JavaScript. And so we wrote these 25 these functions and stuff like that. And most of them are errors, like catching errors that go wrong. And I probably don't know what half of them mean. But what's great about it is the developer, the client-side developer, now has total control over whatever kind of user interface they want to control for the application. So some specifics in there is what happens, when an upload's completed. JavaScript can do something when a file is added, when the queue changes, a queue size changes, or something like that. You can set file size limits. So like what happens when your queue size limit is reached. And there's a Flex, and we only had to do it for one thing, and that was the only thing that the Flex object does on the page is it's a transparent browse button, because that's the button that the users have to click on. We made it transparent, and we allowed the users to pass like 3 parameters to it, and it's 3 different images. There's a hover, down, and over state, or something like that. And so now users, developers, can put a browse button on their page, style it to look like whatever they want, and this whole functionality kicks in, and you can write it however you want to see fit. So let's see a little bit of demo. Let's see how well I can do this. Yeah. So this is, I'll show you first the GitHub page here. And one of the things I learned, or maybe not learned, but from personal experience, is whenever I'm dealing with people's stuff on GitHub, the thing that kills me is when you get there and it's like, oh, I want to learn more about this project. I want to see what's going on here, and there's that README thing, and the README says this is a README. So one of the things that I feel like has helped me a lot is I kind of just said, okay, I want to make this for suckers like me who need as much help as possible. And so the documentation for the plugin, I wrote what I felt like I needed to write so I could remember it tomorrow morning when I woke up. So the end goal here is to have it something like this, which is a very dumbed down styled version of the Flickr uploader. And here's some of the usage stuff that we'll get into in a second. But if everything goes well, the idea is that this browse button right here is Flex, and we're passing 3 images to it. So I can click Browse. I can pick some pictures off here. Yeah, that's a Mac dialog box. That's correct. Yeah, so for the podcast, the question was, is that a native dialog box? And the answer is yes. It's just whatever you have. And so the callbacks that I've built for this specific example have it so that whenever a file is added to the queue, it renders one more line into this queue dialog box. I get a lot of questions. Oh, how does this, make this work for me? And the answer is this plugin by itself, all it does is allow you to build out the interface. There is no kind of built-in, no standard, no accepted. It's going to do whatever you tell it to do. So you have to program it to tell it these things. But we have the option of we can clear the queue, we can delete one at a time, stuff like that. And then when you hit start uploading, those are small files. Let's see if I can get some big files. we start uploading. Ah, okay. Too big. Well, the idea is that when you start uploading, you can track progress through Flex. And Flex can push those progress events back to JavaScript, and then you can do with those JavaScript events whatever you want. So in this case, if we had a larger image, you would see individual file upload progresses there. And then as well as a whole, this box down here tracks the whole like session upload and stuff like that. Yeah, so question?
The maximum file limit, is that a limitation imposed by S3 or by Flex? Where is that coming from?
So the maximum file limit is something that you can set yourself. That's just another parameter that you can pass to the plugin. So if your client's concerned about too much bandwidth or something like that, you can put a limit. I put a limit on this because it's just an application that's sitting out there free for the world to upload, and I didn't want some bozo getting happy and uploading gigs and gigs of stuff into the server. So yeah, there are very few things that I can think about that you can't customize for this specifically. S3 does have a file limit, and I don't know what that is. It's very big right now. Is it terabytes? Yeah, it's in the terabyte range. So another question back there?
So a lot of Ruby people like testing. Oh, yeah. Have you been able to hook this up to anything like water or
no.
I don't know, any of those like Happy Bear or something like that?
No.
Just curious.
Testing and I kind of go like this. I can't convince clients to pay for it. So they want the best and they want it fast and they don't see the value in it. So no, none of this has been tested, unfortunately. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the logistics of testing Flash, I can't imagine. I know that Flex does have a compiler. It's compiled, and that compiler has some sort of validation built into it. Yeah, it's probably nasty, whatever it would be. So that's a real basic example, and I wish I had. I'm just going to try and find some better files here. I just expose the ins and outs of my computer to you guys here. Let's try that out. There we go. So we can track individual file upload progress as well as total progress across the bottom. And since it's all HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, eat it up, tear it up, do whatever you want with it. This allows you to do it. And I have a nice little all files get uploaded, Flickr redirects, whatever you need it to. So that's kind of a generic, low-level overview of the plugin. Where the fun part that I want to talk about is a more complex example. This is something we're using in production right now, or really close to. So for a more complex example, where you actually want to have a little more interaction with your application on Ruby, some big friends of mine are Paperclip, Delayed Job. Not only do we not want to have the Rails app handling the upload and kind of temp files and stuff like that, I want to have them do our magic, processing, any sort of file heavy lifting. I want that to be done not by my server. And then I mixed up a kind of regenerated version of Delayed Paperclip, which Delayed Paperclip is another plugin that sits on top of Paperclip, and instead of processing your images immediately, it waits till the file's been uploaded, your object's created, and then it says, okay, now let Delayed Job do that. But the problem with that is that it does it as soon as the object is created, and for mine, I wanted to be able to create that Delayed Job whenever I felt like it. And the last thing is the WebSockets. I don't know if everybody was here. Was it December when Nick and Dan talked on WebSockets? I watched that. I think I watched that show 3 times over Christmas on the podcast. If you haven't seen the WebSocket stuff, it's really cool. And we're trying to get it in more and more apps. So here's a little bit more complex example. Our user there in the top left, he says, hey, I want to start uploading my files. And he gets to interact with HTML. This is good because designer Matt likes it. The HTML triggers some JavaScript, which makes a callback to the Flex app, goes to Rails, and Rails says, hey, here's your key. It's a lightweight transaction. Information request in, small key out real quick. And now your Flex object has enough to start pushing that large file to S3. When we're doing stuff, we use a temp folder. We put all the stuff in a temp folder on S3. And in the meanwhile, your user gets some upload progress. The Flex app is pushing information to HTML and stuff like that. When the file's done, Flex does a callback again, and it hits JavaScript. We can tell the user, hey, your upload's been complete. Congratulations, pat on the back. But JavaScript also is going to trigger an AJAX call to our Rails server and says, hey, a file's been uploaded. We know it's got this file name. We know it's in the temp directory. And that's pretty much all Rails needs. And so Rails then can create an object for that attachment, that upload, whatever it is it's tracking. And then at that point, I have Rails go out and say, OK, we're going to create a little worker here, a little delayed job. And its only job is to rename the file from that temp file to where Paperclip is going to expect it to be. Because Paperclip, you can put the kind of the more complex naming conventions in there. This is photo/ID/style, whatever you need. And so our little delayed job guy, he sits there and he does the heavy lifting of renaming the file on S3 and can communicate any information you want back to our user through WebSockets. So if you had a dialog box there that was similar to Flickr's, where the first 80% of it is an upload progress bar, the next 10% is some sort of processing, and the last 90% is a finishing touches, you can push that information back to the user. You can say, this delayed job is working. It's doing what you expect it to. This is a good thing. And right before that delayed job dies, I have it create another delayed job, which is to reprocess the file. It comes with Paperclip. And this is kind of the delayed Paperclip functionality, is that I get to call that reprocess file whenever I want. And so I call it late in the game. And then that poor guy, especially when we're handling images and there's 10 different styles of that image or something like that, that guy is the one that sits there and chugs away for 10 to 20 seconds per file. And same kind of benefit. You can push the information of how his progress is doing back through Pusher, through WebSockets, to JavaScript, to HTML, to the end user. And the end user gets feedback for every step of this progress, for this process, I'm sorry. So yeah, good overview. Question?
Does the reprocess worker pull the file from S3 onto your server in order to do its work?
I think it does, yeah. I think it has to, actually. And so it pulls, and it's always looking for the file in the whatever the naming convention that you set up. It's looking for that original file name. And that's why you have to, or at least, yeah, that's why we have to move it from a temp directory to the final resting place, where it's going to expect it and stuff like that. But that all comes kind of out of the box with Paperclip. You don't have to do anything smoke and mirrors to convince it that it's not there or something like that. So yeah, so this is what we've come up with to get as close to a user experience as possible for our end users, for managing and uploading large amounts of files. Our clients like it. From an architecture standpoint, I like that it hits my server twice, and both times is asking for a very, very small bit of information. The hashtag, the XML that it returns for the key, I mean, those response times are nil, as well as any time that it's notifying the server. All the heavy lifting is done directly by the Flex application and delayed job, which most of our stuff is on Heroku. And so if the client complains that, hey, some of my customers are saying it's taking too long to process these files, we can say, hey, not a problem. Just go in there and turn up the number of workers you've got working on it. Actually, I saw a plugin the other day where somebody has it adjusts your workers for you. It's built on top of the Heroku plugin, so it will control your workers for you. It'll say, oh, it looks like you have a delayed job. I'm going to add a worker to your instance. It looks like you have 20 delayed jobs. I'm going to add 20 workers to your instance, and now they're done, so I'm going to set you back to 0. So we're looking at kicking around that kind of idea. And then it's, because Heroku counts it by the second, right? So you could have 30 workers for 10 seconds, and it's just real quick. So that's our complex example. I'll walk you through some of the code. This is not meant for viewing on screen. I'm sorry, but I was going to put the notes out later. Put these up online. This is one of the callbacks that the Flex application calls. Is what an upload complete handler. What are we going to do with it? It passes us some upload options and the event, and the upload options all contain the file. What we got here? We got a file size, file name, and a content type. And then all I do is I throw an AJAX request back to my server, and it's live. So the Rails server gets that, and this is just a kind of generic create. But instead of paperclip getting a file, you just set those 3 attributes: name, size, type. And then my photo has this delayed paperclip to process in the background. And as soon as it gets saved, we call this process to begin delayed image processing, which then starts the renaming process. The rename process, when it's done, calls the reprocessing function. So to show this off, this is the development version of the production app that's running it and stuff like that. And this is a little bit better. So this is an application for creating virtual tours. It allows a photographer to upload 100 photos, high-res photos of a house that's on the real estate market. And so they, per tour, it's anywhere from like 40 to 150. And these guys are shooting the high-quality JPEG things. So this was the demand right here. Was we did not want to have that handled directly. So this one should look a little bit better. No file size limit or anything. So the kind of the queue gets built, and whenever folks are ready, they can start uploading. And this is just going to run for a while. So you can, what we've done here is, as each file goes up, it's going on to S3. That's fine. But it doesn't quite reach 100% because 100% is when it's been renamed and resized and stuff like that. So the delayed jobs in the background, the workers are starting to clear these out by renaming, and now they're resizing. And in this release, we just have a polling. The client polls the server every 5 seconds. Not ideal, but it works pretty well. So this first guy is probably going to take a while, but eventually they'll start going through. And when it's done, it redirects to the next page and stuff like that. So I think that's it. Next steps. Ideally, I'd like this to be not so flash heavy. And some steps that we can take for that is that HTML5 is coming out with very sketchy and very client-specific experimentational support for 2 things. And one of them is progress tracking. HTML5 is supposed to have progress tracking, watching a file leave the client. And HTML5 also has a new input that is an input type file multiple. And those 2, there we go. Now we can see some of those guys getting renamed. Those 2 things would replace Flex, like the whole need for Flash in this. And it would be a primarily It'd be entirely JavaScript. JavaScript would do the pinging to the Rails server instead of Flex, and all the tracking and stuff like that, which would be cool. But the support matrix for it now, I don't even think there's overlap between these two things. So it's kind of fun. So I'm not holding my breath, but that's fun. One of the big requests on GitHub is file chunking. S3 now supports it, which would be great for uploading that 2 gig video that you just shot off your HD cam. The only problem is that Flash would have no idea how to chop that up into little 10 meg files. But if something like that came along, I think that would be ideal. A lot of people have been asking for it. So yeah, I think that's as far as this goes for now. I've got a couple hands.
2 questions for you. Could you do the chunking during your on-server resize step?
Yeah, but by then it's already up on the server. So if you had a file that was already on your server, yeah, but this is coming from the client. So the question in the back was, what's the benefit of chunking? And the benefit of chunking is if I have a 2 gig file, and you chop it up into 10 meg pieces or something like that, and we're on this UCSD Wi-Fi, which has some weird, I had to shut off my browser and shut off my Wi-Fi, turn it back on, turn around and jump up and down. If that were to cut out unexpectedly, or something halfway through, or your 20 megs from the end of your file, instead of having to start over entirely, it would say, oh, hey, you started uploading this and you got 98% of the way there, and now all you got to do is upload the last 20. No, the question, it wouldn't speed up the process at all. It's the same upload rate, everything. It's just you have the benefit of, it doesn't have to be a one shot. Yeah, there's a word for that. Capital, I can't remember what it is. So.
Do you have the Heroku app that you showed? Is that available somewhere on GitHub, or? No,
it's not.
That might solve your people asking how to actually implement it.
Yeah.
Problem.
No, I don't have that hosted anywhere. Mostly because when I was first publishing this, I didn't understand Git, and I didn't want to start publishing my S3 credentials on accident or something like that. So there is a couple of docs and gists where I went through and published pretty much the whole thing. So there's a designer's attempt at sharing it. So yeah. Can we pass that mic to the back there?
So just real quick, I don't know enough about Flex, but the reason Flex can't do that is that because it can't get to the disk to cut it up on disk and then start uploading?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it either. Flash is not. Flash is not allowed to make 10 files. That's been clarified for us in the front here. So, yeah, when I was looking through the documentation, the file manipulation libraries in Flex are pretty close to nil. So that's it. Oh, right, another question.
How easy would this be to just hook it up to something non-S3? Like you just point it somewhere else and turn off the credentialing? Because the interface is really cool. You know, the uploader and.
That's a great question. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think it would have to have the ability to respond to a similar post request. And you could, I mean, yeah, with that in mind, it's probably wouldn't be that hard. But I actually don't know. This is really built on the back of other giants. I'll pull it up here in a second, but I'm the branch of a branch of a branch kind of thing. So I didn't touch too much of the Flex other than to remove as much UI as possible.
So I noticed on the your GitHub page you've got some stuff on Rails 2.3. Could you sort of quickly just describe what that's like?
Yeah, that's another big question is what if I want to use this on not Rails 3? The reason it's Rails 3 is because I have a lot of generators built into it that allow you to just run 2 or 3 rate commands and it builds the right controller. It puts the cross-domain file on S3 for you and a few other things. So that just makes it easier. But by itself, it's really just a Flex file with one fancy JavaScript file that kind of handles the communication back and forth. So if you are running like a Rails 2.3 app, I've got, let's see down here. A lot of folks have just kind of pitched in and shared their stuff. My general response is, hey, go check out the generator file that's in there, and go through and just do everything that the generator file is doing by hand. Copy this JavaScript file, copy this controller. Because really, other than that, that's all there is to it. There's nothing that's Rails 3 specific. It's just a bunch of files that need to go in certain places at the right time. On a similar vein, there have been a lot of people asking about Ruby 1.9 and the support for that. And the small amount of Ruby that this does in the controller is when it's generating the signature and the policy document and stuff like that. There's a little bit of encoding, and something changed between 8.7 and 1.92 or something like that. So there, in the issues document, there are a couple of guys that have figured out how to solve those issues. Honestly, I don't understand it at all. So that's the overview of the project. It's a lot of fun. I'm really proud of it, actually, which is cool. I don't say that about too many things. But what's been the real joy and a very kind of interesting learning experience for me is just to like kind of come into the GitHub community and to have 114 people actively pay attention to what you're doing, and to get daily email requests from other people who have an opinion about what I'm doing right or wrong. I get a lot of that kind of stuff. So if I honestly have no idea. How am I doing on time? Doing all right? Okay. So some of the things that I would like to share would be GitHub is a lot of fun. I've never had the experience of doing open source social development like that. One of the things that I would recommend is when I published this, I went back and I think I'm the fourth branch down. And I told everybody that came before me, I said, hey, I really like what you did. I really appreciate what you're doing. This is what I've done with it. Like, is that cool? Do you feel like you're getting enough props? And I sent them this long email. And somewhere, so this is a branch of PRX. PRX is a branch of Green as Jade, and Green as Jade is a branch of ELC. But the Green as Jade guy said, awesome, and now his documentation says, hey, there's finally a replacement for this. And so now everybody who was following this guy kind of got the heads up that, hey, I'm passing the buck on to somebody else here. And so this guy's, yeah, if not less, it's really close. So getting that kind of approval or just like an OK from people that have come before you has been great. Some of the fun things that I've gotten asked to do is to do a lot of people's work for them. Get a lot of people who say, like, don't you understand? This would be very beneficial if you did this one interesting feature or pulled this off. And my response to that has always been, that's really great. I'm available for contract work and consulting work on this kind of stuff. But I'm trying to dodge those bullets on a pretty regular basis. But it is really cool to see how many people actually think this is great, this is good, interesting stuff. And I've gotten constantly people are doing, it's a pull request, I think, is where they fixed one thing and they say, hey, here you go, here's the latest, greatest. And yeah, so on behalf of non-developers working with developer-heavy people, thanks for sharing all that stuff and for being part of the community. It's really cool and definitely the best part of Ruby thus far. So that's all I got. Any questions? Great. All right.